Hi everybody, and welcome to today's lesson for Arduino microcontrollers. Today we're going to be looking at how to fade an LED. Now I know we've been working a lot with our LEDs, but we're learning some really great foundational concepts for us to then begin working with some of those other sensors we can find in our box. For today's lesson we are going to be using the create.arduino.cc, and as a note for those of you in class, figured out the issue with Arduino not connecting with the ones we have. Apparently Arduino requires you to purchase their specific board, so we've gone ahead and done that, and those will be arriving by the end of this week, and we can start using those next week. Alright, so hopefully you've created your new sketch, and let's get started. In our comment section up above, we're going to go ahead and just label this as Fade LED, and we'll call this version 1. And then we'll go into line 4, hit enter a few times so we can create some space. So the first thing we need to do, as always when working with our LEDs, and that we've been doing every time, is creating the constant integer. We'll do const int LED, and we're going to set our LED to 9. Pay no attention to the baby pooping in the background too, so that's alright. Next we'll hit enter. Make sure you do hit your semicolon there. Create another integer, and we're going to call this integer I, just the letter I, and we're going to set that equal to 0. And the reason for that, I'm just going to clean that up for us. The reason for that is we need to have a starting point set up for our LED to start bouncing between the values of 0 and 255. And we want our default starting point to be off. Right, now in void setup, let's go ahead and just set up our pin mode. And we're going to set that as LED as output. And we're good with pin mode. Next, let's jump into our void loop. And in our void loop, we are going to create an equation. Now this equation is essentially just going to say that if I is equal to 0, and it is less than, or I is less than 255, then we need to start adding numbers onto I, and it needs to start building up. So to do that, we're going to type in 4, and we'll go in parentheses, I equal sign 0, and then semicolon, I is less than 255, and then semicolon, and we'll do the command I and then plus plus. Now what this is saying is I is 0, or I is less than 255, then I, or basically 0 here, needs to start adding numbers sequentially. So we add this plus plus sign. Once we have that, go ahead and do your end curly bracket, or end parentheses, excuse me, and then start curly bracket. And go ahead and we're going to type in a new command that we haven't used yet, and that is analog write. So like we've used in the past digital write. Digital write essentially just does either the value of low, which is 0, or on, or high, which is 255. Instead now we're going to specifically write the value that we want. So we have analog write, and we'll do LED, comma, and I, so our integer I. Then we'll do semicolon, and we'll do a delay of 10 milliseconds on this. So it's just constantly checking that value every 10 milliseconds. Then we can go ahead and move past our second, or our curly bracket that we're here. So we have on line 17, this curly bracket is corresponding to 14. So we'll click past that, hit enter, and then we're going to write another equation, which is essentially telling it to do the opposite command. That if the value is 255 for I, then it needs to start subtracting till it gets back down to 0. So very similar like up here, we're just going to write it in reverse now. So we're going to go for I is 255, semicolon, I is greater than 0, and then I is minusing itself. Same thing in parentheses. We'll do start curly bracket, and we're going to cause it to start fading out by 1. And much like the last one we had here, where we had analog right, LED I, we're going to do the same thing of analog right, LED I, semicolon, and we'll do a delay again of that 10 milliseconds. Make sure you had your semicolons there. As you can see, I forgot one up here already. And once we have that, let's just make sure all of our curly brackets are corresponding. So my last curly bracket is corresponding to my void loop up here. On line 21, this curly bracket is corresponding to line 18. And on line 17, this curly bracket is corresponding to line 14, which is exactly what we want to see. We can just go ahead and verify the sketch. And we can see that my sketch is correct. Now, here are a few things that might mess you up on this, just so you're aware. Semicolons has been a big one that's getting us. Not doing our correct capitalization, so remember, pin mode, M needs to be capitalized, analog right, the W needs to be capitalized on there. In your equation here, make sure we are adding the semicolons, which is essentially telling it to stop within the parentheses. So I is 0, or I is less than 255, and I++. And then, of course, analog right, and we'll keep doing that. Same thing here. I is 255, I greater than 0, I minus minus. Those are things that are going to trick you up. If you have problems or issues with this, I know it can be a little hard when I'm away. However, just drop your comments or questions onto either this YouTube video if you're watching it direct on YouTube, or you can leave those on Classroom. All right, thanks for watching.